Hello my sweet friends, welcome back. Today we are going to be doing Steph's book recommendation tag. As soon as I saw that she uploaded this, I freaked out. I freaking love tag videos. At this point, I think I've been watching YouTube for over half my life and I've been making videos for almost 10 years. And back in the day, tag videos were the thing. Everyone filmed tag videos. And I know they're still around, but they're definitely not as popular as they used to be. So when I saw Steph upload hers and I saw it was all based on book recommendations, of course I knew I had to join in and film my own little version of it. I've been watching a bunch of my favorite booktubers upload their version of this and it's just been so fun to see everyone's book recommendations. I will say I recently watched Larissa's from Larry Reads. I'm sure all of you know and love her, and she added a few extra questions on the end, so I'm going to be doing her little extended version because why not? Why would you not want a few more book recommendations? I'll link Steph's video down below as well as Larissa's in case you want to see those extra questions, but I'll also have the questions down below if you want to film your own version of this. Starting off with question number 1, a book you tell people is your favorite. I feel like this is not going to be a surprise to anyone. I think I'd either have to say Magnolia Parks or Archer's Voice. I feel like I talk about these books so often. You're probably sick of hearing me talk about these, especially Magnolia Parks. I'm just so obsessed with both of these. I recommend them to literally everyone. They're just stunning. The best way to describe Magnolia Parks is basically the book version of Gossip Girl. Magnolia and BJ are the main characters in this book and they give a very similar vibe to Chuck and Blair. So if you love Chuck and Blair, you would probably love Magnolia Parks. And Archer's Voice is a super emotional small town romance. Both characters have a lot of trauma and they just find a lot of comfort in each other, and there is so much character development in this book. I'm gonna try and not repeat the same book for multiple questions because I feel like I could use those two books for a lot of these questions. So I'm gonna try not to do that, but we'll see how we go. Number 2 is a book that is your guilty pleasure. I feel like everyone's definition of a guilty pleasure is gonna be a little bit different, but for me, I'm gonna say To All the Boys I've Loved Before because I think this book is literally aimed at like 12 or 13-year-olds, and I am 24 and I read this for the first time at the end of last year and I fell in love with it. I just have such a soft spot for YA, specifically YA romances. I just think they're so fun. They're fluffy, they're cheesy, they're cringy, but they're just so cute and I always have just the best time reading them. I feel like I've been hearing a lot of people say, oh, I don't really read YA anymore. I feel like I've outgrown YA, and I do understand, and obviously there's personal preference and that's so fine, but I really do believe that I'm never gonna outgrow YA. It's lighthearted, it's fun, it's easy to read, you can just eat it up, and sometimes that's exactly what you need, especially as a palate cleanser. So I don't think I'll ever say goodbye to my YA books. Number 3, a book that everyone loved but you didn't. I think I'm gonna say Get a Life Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. I really wanted to love this, but it just wasn't for me. This is a very typical like cartoon cover, looks really cute on the outside but ends up being pretty spicy on the inside, and I feel like in this specific situation it felt like there was so much spice that the plot ended up really lacking, and that is just like a pet peeve that I have. Like, I don't care if you have spice, but if you add so much spice that you now don't have enough time to really develop the plot, it just grinds my gears. However, I do want to try the other books in this trilogy because I've heard really good things about them and I might not feel the same about the other 2 books, and I really want to read Talia Hibbert's new YA romance, Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute or something along those lines, and because it's YA it might be more my vibe, so I'm gonna check that out at some point. Number 4, a book that you read the fastest. I've only talked about romance so far, so I'm gonna switch it up and we're gonna talk about some fantasy, in particular The Infernal Devices. This is a YA urban fantasy trilogy. It's set in the Victorian era and it is just so good. I think I read all of these books in like one day each, so 3 books, 3 days. I ate it up, and I read this fairly recently, like January of this year, which is only a couple months ago, and I already want to reread it. Like, these books are 100% new favorites of mine. I know that so many people love this, so many people like grew up loving this trilogy, and I get it. I get the hype. It is phenomenal. Great world, great plot, great characters, great romance. Literally all I could ever ask for. So I devoured this and I'm already excited to reread it. Number 5, a book that deserves more hype. I think I'm gonna go with Last Time We Met by Emily Houghton. This is an adult contemporary romance, and I don't know why I don't hear more about this, and I feel like I've talked about it a few times on my channel, and I'm so sad that it hasn't got more hype, or at least I haven't seen it have as much hype. I will say I did see Hayley Pham read it and she really enjoyed it, so I'm so glad she enjoyed it, but I just wish more people would read this. It gives me major Emily Henry vibes, so if you like Emily Henry, please try this out. In terms of how it's similar to Emily Henry books, I feel like it's got that balance of general fiction with romance. Like, it's not just super romance romance heavy. The characters in this have a lot going on behind the scenes. We get a lot of character development. We just get a lot of their own personal stories, but we also get the romance. It's like a childhood friends to strangers to lovers, and that is probably one of my favorite tropes. And I just really want more people to read this because it's just so wholesome and cute. It is a little bit on the slower side, but it's just such a beautiful story. Number 6, a book that is becoming a movie slash TV show. I have recently seen the trailer popping up for One True Loves. I'm pretty sure this is being made into a movie, and I think it's coming out really soon. Again, I don't follow the like release dates of these types of things very well, but I love this book. This was a 5-star read for me, and I feel like it could make an incredible movie, so I really hope the movie does it justice. Number 7, a book that you reread the most. Okay, this is hard because I don't do a lot of rereading. It's actually a goal of mine to do more rereads this year. I've reread The Inheritance Games twice, and I've also reread Daisy Jones and the Six twice, but in terms of what I reread the most, I would have to go back to either Magnolia Parks or Archer's Voice. With my Magnolia Parks books, I have annotated them all, so I've like highlighted my favorite quotes, underlined things, tabbed them, so I go back and reread quotes from all 4 books, probably at least once a week. And there's also one part of Archer's Voice that I have reread so many times. I don't think this is a spoiler, but there is a scene in Archer's Voice where there is like a fancy event, kind of like a ball, I guess you could say, and our 2 characters are dressed up super nice. But during this scene, our female main character like looks over and sees our male main character all dressed up for the first time, and when she sees him, you can just tell that she is so happy to see him and he is so happy to see her, and it's just like one of those moments where it makes you swoon. It gives me butterflies every time. It's just written so perfectly, and I just have such a clear image of this event in my mind, and it's kind of embarrassing how many times I've reread that scene, but like so good. A book from a genre you don't typically read. I feel like I always hear recommendations for people to read The Silent Patient, and I do agree. I think this is a great thriller. It's really easy to read. It makes you want to keep turning the page. It's short and sweet. Like, it is really good. However, I don't see anyone ever recommending The Maidens. This book is by the same author, by Alex Michaelides, and it is so good. I don't know why I don't hear more about it. The concept of this book is phenomenal. I don't feel like it's as fast paced as this one. Like, I feel like this one really makes you want to keep turning the page, and I feel like this one doesn't do that to the same extent, but it is such a phenomenal story. It is set at a college in Cambridge, and it has that really dark, eerie feel to it. It's so atmospheric. I think there's like Greek mythology themes throughout it. There's like murders going on in the college. There's a creepy professor. No one really knows what's going on, and the ending is just so good, and it has stuck with me for literally years. I think I read this in 2021. So if you liked The Silent Patient and you haven't yet read The Maidens, I definitely recommend. I just had a dead battery, but we're back. Next question is a book that deserves all the hype it gets. I think I'm gonna have to go with The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I feel like this is one of the OG book talk books, but it also, in my opinion, deserves all the hype it gets. This is one of the first books that I read when I got back into reading that really just felt magical to me. Like, when I read this, I was like, oh, this is what it feels like to read a good book. But this is a book that I'm always recommending to people, especially people who want to get back into reading and don't know where to start. I feel like this is a really good middle ground because it's got plot, it's got romance, it's got kind of like a mystery element to it. Okay, the next question is a book you usually recommend when asked to give a recommendation, and I feel like I literally just answered that when I talked about Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, so I'd probably recommend this. If I know the person who's asking for a recommendation loves romance, I almost always recommend Archer's Voice. Question 11 is a book that has your favorite characters. I would say Magnolia Parks, but I'm trying not to reuse the same book over and over again. But apart from Magnolia Parks, I've got to say the Addicted / Calloway sisters world, I guess. The core 6, the core 8, if you know, you know. I am yet to see Found Family as good as Addicted / Calloway. Like, it's just so good. Is the writing and the plot a literary masterpiece? No, it's not. I'm not gonna lie about it. But this series is still one of the best books out there in my opinion, purely based on the characters, the friendships, the romantic relationships, the character development. It's all just so wonderful. If for some reason you haven't heard about this series, it is basically about 3 sisters, Lily, Rose, and Daisy, and their love interests. So there's like 3 couples. It starts off with basically just Lily and Lo, who are best friends, and then over the course of the series we have all of these other characters kind of come in and get a bigger and bigger role, and you see them become best friends, you see them fall in love, you see literally almost their whole life in these 10 books. And there's a spin-off series all about their kids. So if you like character-driven books, you need to read this series. Number 12 is a book you wish you could live in. I can't believe I haven't talked about this book yet, but I think I'd have to say ACOTAR. I just feel like living in a fantasy world in general would be amazing, but specifically in Valaris just sounds so incredible. I can just so clearly see myself just hanging out with the characters in Akatar, gardening and baking with Elaine, reading romance books with Nesta, seeing the banter between the Bat Boys in real life. Like, it just sounds like a dream. I just feel like I am meant to be in a cottage surrounded by beautiful gardens and flowers in a fantasy world. Maybe in the spring court, but also like maybe not the spring court, if you know what I mean. But like, I want to go there. A book you thought you would hate but ended up loving. I was so skeptical about picking up Normal People because it feels like a lot of people hate it, a lot of people love it, and there doesn't seem to be many people in between. A lot of people just don't like Sally Rooney's writing in general, and so I kind of picked this up on a whim and I fell in love with it. I read it in like 2 or 3 days. I fell in love with the characters. I feel like it was written so beautifully. I don't feel like I need to harp on about this for so long because I feel like everyone already kind of knows about this book, but I just adored it. And I was really shocked by how much I loved it, specifically like the writing, because so many people hate it, but I loved it. I really, really loved it. This is another one that I need to reread, and I'd love to annotate this one as well. Number 14 is a book that made you cry, and like my first reaction to this has to be Bright Side by Kim Holden. I don't have the physical copy of this one, but I really, really loved it. It's the book I think of the most when I think about a book that made me cry, because despite you kind of like knowing that something is going to happen, like the book kind of takes a direction where you know something sad is going to happen. You kind of can guess where the plot is taking you, but when it happened I still bawled. Like, I still cried so hard. Number 15, a book you wish you could read for the first time. I mean, obviously all my favorites that I've already mentioned, but apart from that, if I could reread like all the books in the series, I'd have to say Throne of Glass, because this series took so many like twists and turns. There's so much character development. There's so many moments when you're so scared of like what's going to happen next and you don't know if a character is alive or dead or what's happening, and I just know that I'll never be able to reread this series for the first time again and have those kind of emotions that come along with not knowing, I guess. And as much as I'm glad that I never have to not know what's happening to certain characters again, there is just like a beauty in that. It's just such a consuming type of feeling. Like, you just need to know what's going to happen and where the characters are and if they're okay. And you just don't feel like that often. I feel like there are so many books where I'm like, oh, they're probably not dead, or they probably are, and like I don't really care. But like these ones, I was like, this person needs to be alive. Like, please just tell me this person is alive. And I wish I could experience that for the first time again. Number 16, a book that could cure a reading slump. I feel like the perfect reading slump book is something short and sweet, something easy to read, probably not fantasy. I think I'd have to go with the Eden series by Devney Perry. These are the 3rd and 4th book in the series because the first 2 I am lending out to a friend right now. But if you haven't read this series, I would definitely recommend picking up the first book, which is Indigo Ridge. I honestly feel like all the books in this series could be really great for a reading slump, specifically because they're all quite short, all around like the 300-page mark. The first one specifically has a really great mystery romance kind of plot going on, like a bit of romance, a bit of mystery. So I feel like there's always something happening with one of those 2 plot lines, which keeps you interested the whole time. And like I said, it's just short and easy to read. I definitely just recommend that series in general if you haven't read it yet, because it's just so good. I didn't even say, but it's all like small town vibes. Number 17, a book that you think everyone needs to read. I think I'm gonna go with The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. This is not my usual genre, I guess you could say. This is historical fiction, and the reason why I think everyone needs to read this is just because, first of all, it's a beautiful story. It is written beautifully. The like substance of the story is quite beautiful. It's heartbreaking at times, but it's just told so well. I think I said this in my monthly wrap up when I talked about this, but there is a difference between a book and a story, and this is a story. It just feels so real. There is so much depth to it, so many layers. It talks about class, it talks about racism. It also has like the sliding doors effect, kind of, I guess you could say. It's basically about 2 twin sisters who grow up in a fairly low class area, and eventually they leave together, but along the way they get separated, and each twin sister takes a different route in life, in the partner that they choose and the life they decide to live, and you just see how that decision continues to affect them and impact them throughout their whole life. It also has a very big like kind of like mystery element to it. Like I said, so many layers, so much depth. I just could not recommend it enough. Number 18, a book that you think would make an amazing movie. I think I'm gonna go with The Inheritance Games. I think this would just be such a fun movie series. I feel like being able to see all of the riddles and the house that they live in and all of the secret passages and like all of the things in this book, I just think it would be so magical and so mesmerizing. And I feel like just, yeah, seeing this book come to life on a movie screen would honestly be amazing. And I feel like it would appeal to kids and teenagers and adults. So This would just be such a good movie, I think. Number 19, a book you wish everyone would give a shot, even if it's out of their comfort zone. I'm gonna go with Six of Crows because I really think that so many people would enjoy this. Guys, girls, adults, teenagers. This is YA fantasy, but it's not the type of fantasy that's really, really hard to understand. This story centers around a heist. A guy called Kaz has been offered this job of this heist where he has to go into a really dangerous place, steal something and take it back and deliver it to the guy who's paying him. But the money he's paying him is amazing and would totally change his life. And so he gets like a little team of 6 together who are all kind of like the best in their fields, and they all come together to take out this really high risk, high stakes mission heist type of thing. And it's just so entertaining. There's a lot of action and adventure, but there's also romance, found family, great plot, great dynamics between characters. I just feel like it has a bit of everything, and I personally don't think you have to read Shadow and Bone before you read this, so sue me if you want, but that's my personal opinion. And number 20 is a book you will never forget. I honestly just think any of my absolute favorites that I've mentioned. I think the books that have stuck with me the most are Addicted / Calloway, Akita, Throne of Glass, Magnolia Parks, Archer's Voice, and probably Evelyn Hugo. Those are kind of the books that have stuck with me the most, that I think of the most often, especially the characters where I feel like they would be my friends, like the Addicted Calloway, Magnolia Parks, Akita. Those books I think of on like a daily or weekly basis. Those books are just like ingrained in my brain. I'm never not thinking about them or the characters. But those are all of the questions, so that is the end of this tag video. Thank you so much if you've stuck around to the end of just me like chatting through books and chatting through recommendations. Hopefully you found something that you might want to try and you might want to read, and hopefully you love it. But I love you guys, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Goodbye.